The spectacular bronzes of the Shang Dynasty in the second millennium BC testify to a well-advanced civilization. The foundation had been laid: cities and government, art and architecture, weapons and chariots, ancestral worship, the written language, agriculture and animal husbandry. But it remained for the succeeding Zhou dynasty to build the structure of the great East Asian tradition. In the southern part of modern Shanxi province, the Chou people began their ascent. Harassed by warlike neighboring tribes, they became alert in defense and efficient in production. During the 11th century BC, Zhou leaders made a bold move. Knowing that the Shang had overspent itself and that its army was diluted with unwilling slaves. In the final decisive battle, Shang's oppressed soldiers turned against their own commanders. Zhou's swift victory did not interrupt the cultural continuity. It adopted the fruits of Shang creativity, such as the bronze art, for its own use. This became the normal pattern of Chinese dynastic changes. The victors civilized by the vanquished, the conquered invigorated by the conquerors. As outsiders from the west moving into the central Yellow River Valley, Zhou rulers knew the importance of the core area and named it the Central Kingdom, or Zhongguo, by which China is still known today. Constant struggle between agricultural people in the Central Kingdom and pastoral and nomadic tribes in peripheral regions became a major force in molding Chinese history. Yet the concept of insiders and outsiders is more philosophical than geographical. Adherents of the Chinese culture were considered the people of the Central Kingdom, regardless of race. Those who were not absorbed into the insiders' civilization were called barbarians, regardless of where they lived. To justify its rebellion against the established rule, the House of Zhou transferred supreme authority from Shang's ancestor god to heaven and called its new king the Son of Heaven. The rationale was that Shang had lost the mandate of heaven, but Zhou had responded to its will. But heaven did not play favorites. Its blessing had to be earned by the virtue of man and eternal vigilance against laxity and misrule. To control a large area with limited loyal forces, the founder of Zhou devised a political system based upon the clan, and its ideal was, under heaven, all one family. At the top was the absolute ruler, son to heaven and king to man, and head of a big family. Under him were the enfeoffed royal relatives and a few descendants of the previous dynasty. In turn, the lord of each state was head of his political and social family. Under him were his ministers and officials and supervisors, all the way down to the common people, that is, the farmers and laborers. The merging of the political structure with familial relationship made all positions in life a matter of birth. The oldest son was heir to the top spot, while other sons were his fiefs. This new order was designed for maximum stability and minimum mobility, and it demanded the best man on the top as well as the most obedient subject at the bottom. Ever since the forebears of the Zhou people forsook their nomadic life, hunting became supplementary to their main effort of food producing. By now, agriculture had become the foundation of their livelihood. Their legendary ancestor was the Lord of Agriculture. Their rulers symbolically brought food to the peasants at the beginning of each planting season and offered them feasts after each harvest. After the conquest of the Central Kingdom, the economic burden of the nation continued to rest upon the shoulder of the peasant. Nominally, all subjects and all land belonged to the king. In fact, he administered only the land in and around the royal capital. He exacted tribute from his dukes, who exacted tribute from their ministers, who in turn exacted tribute from the officials. At the bottom of the ruling class were the Chou, or hereditary nobles, who actually managed the land. The social superstructure from the king to the Chou took everything from the peasants after feeding, lodging, and clothing them. Though orderly in appearance, the Zhou political and economic structure worked only to a degree. First of all, there was the problem of reactionary Shang remnants. The Zhou regime deported much of the Shang population to the east, where it eventually produced scholars, merchants, and thinkers, and spread its influence southward. Moreover, the system could hardly survive a bad king. This beautiful vessel was cast in 861 BC, during the reign of a king who suppressed public opinion by imposing the death penalty. His tyranny brought about a popular rebellion that deposed him in 841 BC, the first exact dating in Chinese history. In addition, there were threats of outsiders. Nomads in the north and northwest raided their southern neighbors to supplement their livelihood, and later even joined rebels inside to raise havoc. In 770 BC, Western barbarians killed the Zhou king and sacked the capital near the modern city of Xi'an. The royal house moved eastward, dividing the dynasty into Western and Eastern Chou periods. By this time, the Zhou king had become a mere figurehead as stronger dukedoms absorbed weaker ones and grew into sovereign states mightier than the royal house. This disintegration took place all the way down the line. The Son of Heaven was ordered about by his vassals. Feudal lords were deposed or assassinated by their ministers. Power gravitated downward. As the political structure crumbled, the economic structure underwent a parallel change. Peasant farmers, who used to be serfs of their lords, became more and more de facto possessors of the land they tilled. In recognition of this fact, the Duke of Lu initiated a 20% tax in kind in 594 BC to replace the system of taking all the harvest from the farmer after allowing for his living. Moreover, pioneers turned wasteland into new soil, which was free from hereditary transference, and brave warriors and persons of merit began to receive land as reward. Ownership by individuals led to buying and selling, turning land into real estate. During this critical period around the 6th century BC, China began switching from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. Iron metallurgy probably originated among a tribe in the east. The initial use of this new metal was ornamental, for it was rare enough to be decorated with gold and silver inlay, such as this buckle. At the same time, money economy developed with commerce. The rich were able to amass huge capital, while the poor became landless tenants. As warfare among states intensified, taxes rose to 50% or more, forcing tenant farmers off the land to become wanderers. Such upheavals caused the stirring of the bottom layer of the ruling class, the Chou, for now ability counted more than birth. Many talented Chou rose to become the brains behind princes and great merchants, tasting the luxury of gold and jade, as well as risking the perils of sword and poison. Living in an age of uncertainty, the thinkers among them searched for a deeper meaning of nature and man. They began to evolve theories for building a better society and tried to influence the rulers to put these ideas into practice. By far, the most influential philosopher was Confucius, known in the West as Confucius. In 551 BC, he was born into a poor family, descended from the royal lineage of the Shang Dynasty. He preached that Li, the rights for functions and rules of conduct, was the binding force of an enduring social order. He was politically conservative, resting his hope for peace on the education of the rulers and in combining power with virtue. As he put it, lead the people by laws and regulate them by penalties. The people will try to keep out of jail, but will have no sense of shame. Lead the people by virtue and restrain them by rules of decorum, and the people will have a sense of shame and, moreover, will become good. The greatest virtue of all, the medicine that he offered for the ills of the world, was Zhen, or humanity. Confucius saw humanity as what distinguishes man from other beings who merely struggle for survival. To put Zhen into practice, Confucius simply suggested, do not do unto others what you do not wish for yourself. Understanding others through oneself was the Confucian way of Zhen. Another essential standard in human conduct, as he preached to his disciples, was Yi, or righteousness. Yi must always be placed above profit. When facing the temptation of gain, one must think first of right or wrong. Confucius said, wealth and honor begotten by wrong are like floating clouds. His concept of a well-ordered society tolerated no gap between name and substance. He replied to a duke who asked for political advice, let the ruler be a true ruler, the minister a true minister, the father a true father, the son a true son. What he meant was, a ruler in name but not in fact would put his government in default. The rectification of name, therefore, was essential in maintaining order as well as social rigidity. Reverence for authority extended to his concept of heaven. Confucius professed to know the will of heaven, which he followed by doing what he considered to be right, regardless of success or failure, profit or peril. With this religious faith, he remained calm when threatened with physical violence by the people of Kwang. He told his followers, since heaven has not wished to let civilization perish, what can they do to me? Yet Confucius was not superstitious. He did not talk about the supernatural and refused to discuss what happened after death, because, as he put it, not enough has been known about life. Confucius realized that in education, there are no class distinctions. His optimistic belief in the perfectibility of man through learning established the Chinese scholar-statesman tradition. By stressing learning, the Confucian school became known as the Zhu, or literati school, even though its teaching also included archery, charioting, mathematics, as well as rituals, music, and history. Confucius tried to interest rulers in the virtue of man, but found them more concerned with the art of war. Failing in politics, Confucius turned to teaching his younger contemporaries and writing for posterity. He was said to have had 3,000 students, among whom 72 were outstanding. In writing, he intended to transmit ancient knowledge rather than to create. This served to uphold traditional values and to preserve the feudal system. He edited and collected works of history, philosophy, art, and literature into 6 classics that embodied the essence of ancient Chinese civilization. These works, together with his sayings and rules of conduct, as recorded by disciples in the book called the Analects, formed the foundation of Confucianism. After the death of Confucius in 479 BC, the first serious opponent of his philosophy gained prominence. Mo Di came from the same region as Confucius, but was a member of the common people. While Confucius upheld traditional institutions, Mo Di relied on the strength of common man. While Confucius transmitted ancient learning, Mo Di disdained ritual and music. To Mo Di, the greatest good for the greatest number demanded frugal living and simple burial. He condemned aggressors, calling them mass murderers and common thieves. His antidote for violence was love. Peace would prevail when mutual love became universal love. Modi's yardstick was concrete benefits and results, not theories and decorum. Everything had to be reduced to essentials of utility for defense and production. He had no use for artistic expressions and pleasurable pursuits. His relentless drive on himself and his disciples to defend the weak and relieve the poor did not save his world from chaos, but his philosophy exerted a vital counterforce to the abusive power of the rulers. Confucius and Modi lived in a pivotal period in Chinese history. The agricultural economy began to mature since the 14th century BC, when Shang kings settled in a permanent capital. Raiding neighbors for slaves diminished with the advent of Zhou, which relied on peasant farmers for its productive force. Symbols of faith were gradually transformed into designs of beauty, reflecting profound changes in the social system. Together with the breakdown of the paternal authority of the Zhou house, the transitional period of 8th to 5th century BC created social mobility that stimulated the flowering of philosophers. Among them, the one who exerted the single greatest influence on Chinese institutions and ways of life was Confucius. In centuries to come, his followers would integrate new ideas and meet new challenges to maintain Confucianism as the leading doctrine for the rulers. His conservatism and entrenchment in ancient traditions also made him a prime target of revolutionaries in our time.